Probably about time we do this long-awaited video. Everybody wants to know, what do you like about the Panga? What works on the Panga? What kind of fuel mileage? How to mount a trolling motor, trim tabs, mounting a sonar, all the questions. So I've had this Panga for a year and a half now, and it's been a lot of fun. So I've been up creeks and rivers and on the lakes and fished a crappie tournament out of it. Didn't do too well. Did a little bit offshore running, bay running. I can honestly say it's probably the most universal boat I've ever seen that will go offshore. Starting this thing out, it was supposed to be something affordable. I could take offshore, take friends fishing. Originally was going out on jet skis. It was fun. I want to do it again. There's just not a lot of room, and when you're sitting there fishing, you get a cramp, whatever. You know, the comfort's a lot better, and sadly, I get better fuel economy in the Panga than I did a jet ski. On a good day, I can get 6 miles to the gallon offshore. I've had it as good as 6.8 at 28 miles an hour on the lake. Flat surface, perfectly calm. Kind of about like it is right now. It'd be perfect for it. No wind. Wind, that is a good conversation. So this thing drafts about 8.5, 9 inches, and it's a high side, so I've got over 2 foot of hull hanging up out of the water. You put this in a 20+ mile an hour wind situation, and when you're not moving, the wind will tell you where you're going to go, unless you have trolling motor, anchor, whatever. But it does carry sideways pretty well in the wind. That is definitely one of the negatives. So the trolling motor, the first mount I did out of aluminum, and it seems to work really well on the lake. I got it out in some higher wind and ran offshore a few times with it, and it cracked. Well, so I took it back off, re-welded it, gusseted it. I said, well, okay, it's not gonna crack now. Well, took it out a few more times. Sure enough, it cracked again. So I'm like, all right, well, maybe I'm thinking about this wrong. You know, the gunnels of these boats flex quite a bit, and I'm trying to use aluminum to stiffen it, which is causing the aluminum to flex. So, okay, now I get why it's cracking. Built a second version, built it out of fiberglass. Same time, that's when I decided I had enough of motor guide. And I ripped that thing off, threw it in the closet, got a Minn Kota. And I can say I've been that much happier on the Minn Kota. The Minn Kota is great, holds me in spot well, doesn't try to throw me overboard. Apparently there was some whole legal thing over that. Yeah, even outside of the function, the motor got salt water in it, brand new motor, second time I took it out. And a lot of it's just the design of how they're building their stuff. It's just not that good a quality. Maybe you've had good luck with it. That's just my experience. So the idea was to build a Panga, that simple boat, something cheap and affordable to go offshore, but still safe enough to get out there. Also wanted something small enough that could tow it long distances without consuming too much fuel, and that's become a bigger issue even since I bought it. Yeah, so the whole idea was, you know, bare bones. You know, these things get great, amazing fuel economy when they're just a tiller steer and a hull. And part of the idea of the design of the hull is to be a lightweight, kind of go over the top of the waves. You know, these other offshore boats, they're designed to plow through the water, and this is kind of designed to skim over the top of it. So, kind of a big difference there. So my thought was, well, I'll put a console on it, and I'll just keep it as light and small as possible. And then we got a T-top, and then I added speakers, and of course you need graphs, and a radio, VHF radio, switch panel, and then we added rod holders, radar, autopilot, trim tabs, cell repeater, satellite text messaging. I'll get into all that good stuff later, but it's no longer a simple Panga. I can see the side of having a simple Panga too. I wouldn't mind it still being simple. It's just I use the tools and the technologies that are in this. So it does handle different with all the extra added. Every time I added something, I could tell the difference of how it handled. But everything I added was another tool to go fishing with. So I added a better live well, I added better seating, more fuel capacity. My original goal for this thing was to run 30 miles out and run back. And that's all the fuel I was worried about, you know, having a good, you know, extra third at minimum of fuel capacity is your typical offshore goal. I've done some about 40 so miles out. So that was going out of Port O'Connor, which is a good 10-15 miles to just the jetties from there to run offshore. So, you know, you're talking over 100 miles round trip. I've done some that were 100 miles round trip, hitting several spots, just scouting out, you know, which structures seem to hold better fish. So yeah, all the extra add-ons and all that, it's getting used, it's doing what it's supposed to do. And at the end of the day, it's this something that I can get away and, you know, go on these adventures for. And at the same time, I've put all this together for a fraction of the price of what it costs to have this built. Building things probably isn't for everybody, and if you added up the cost of my time, but for me, part of the fun is the building experience and everything you learn in the process along the way. We'll get into this some more, but half of the stuff I built on this boat did not work the first time. I had to go back, cut it all back apart, redo it, like the trolling motor. It went from aluminum, now it's fiberglass. It's working great right now. So let's get into the layout a little bit. So the sides of the boats, I've got on each side towards the back and each side towards the front, I've got T-track. And I've got rod holders, tackle tray holders, my live scope set up. I've got, of course, you gotta have cup holders and then little cubbies on the side of those. I've also got rod holders clamped up here on top of the T-top. These are great for when I'm trolling because I can sit here at the console, I can watch the graphs. Fish bites, I can grab it, I can hand it off somebody, or I can have them jump up and grab it. This console built out 1.5 inch, Schedule 40 aluminum, and it's plenty stout. I've bolted it through the ribs of the factory hull. Two certainties in boats, affects the salt water, and the other one is 5200. I glued it down with 5200, so with the bolts and the 5200 combined, it shouldn't go anywhere. So yeah, my console is 24 inches wide and 18 inches deep. That's a pretty small footprint on the floor of this thing. You don't typically see a console that small, and that came with its own challenges, especially for the amount of electronics that I have. We've got two 9-inch graphs, we've got a heading sensor, we've got a secondary 7-inch graph that controls the trolling motor, is networked to that. We've got the radio head unit, we've got the VHF, we've got the Suzuki gauge cluster, we've got the trim tab controls, we've got a power outlet for a spotlight, we've got switch panel for all the lights, pumps, radar, electronics. We've got another switch panel, controls the live well. We've got a manual compass for backup. We've got our horn switch. We've got our Fell Marine overboard. I'll get into that one later. What else we got? We got jack plate. Now on hydraulic steering. Inside the console, there's the autopilot system. There's a network switch in the console. There's a sonar module in the console to run for the GT41 transducer. There's a cell repeater, a charging clip-in base for the satellite messaging system. And there's a remote control for the iPilot Link trolling motor. So the live scope and the front graph is networked to the back graph, so I can actually see the live scope. I've got the live scope on a portable box. I've got a remote control. I can spin the top. I've got a little arrow on top of the box with the live scope, so I can spin that back and forth and from the console. So the idea is I can have somebody sitting on the cooler fish box up front and have them their own screen. They can be sitting there fishing. I can see what they're seeing. I can help guide them. I can see the arrow. I'm running the trolling motor from here. And yes, 24 volt, 72-inch shaft trolling motor is plenty for this boat. If you're in that rough of conditions, you're probably not going to have a comfortable time fishing anyway. I usually run it a few inches up, even offshore, and it's plenty. It doesn't come out of water. Or if it does, there was one really tall wave because of a big boat coming by in combination with already 3-foot swells at 5 seconds or whatever, choppy conditions. One of the big things on the trolling motor mounting is not putting it all the way forward on the bow. It works perfectly in line with the gunnel. I've never had an issue with it not holding me tight because of it. So batteries in this boat. I have a lot of batteries. So I'm running the sealed lead acid 35 amp batteries for everything but my cranking battery. I've got 4 batteries for the trolling motor. 2 are wired together, so we're actually running a 24-volt system there. These are mounted in the bow to keep some of the weight forward. And the floor forward of the console are 2 additional 35 amp hour batteries wired in series, and the AGM cranking battery. Being forward of the console helps reduce the weight of the transom. The live scope runs on its own 20 amp hour lithium battery. The house and trolling motor batteries are charged through relays from the Suzuki's outboard 40 amp alternator. The DF140 outboard pushes the Panga reliably at a top speed of 42 miles per hour and a comfortable cruising speed of around 30 miles per hour, using a 3/19/21 pitch prop. A lot going on back here with 9x12 Bennett trim tabs, 2 side scan transducers, both reading depth at speeds over 30 miles per hour, underwater lights, live well and washdown pump pickup, live well drain, bob action jack plate with a shallow water anchor mount, and a ladder. As you can see, transducers mount well to the slope portion of the transom. Everybody wants to know how to mount these. This seems to work without any interference. I modified the trim tabs to line up better with the hull by extending the stainless steel mounting flange to match the angle of the transom of the Panga. The trim tabs really do make a difference, allowing for an intentional lift while running to reduce the impact of large drops on the flat delta pad of the Panga. The Garmin Autopilot is definitely a luxury item. Inevitably, it keeps the Panga on a more direct course, reducing time and fuel, but in large, reduces fatigue from longer offshore trips where every wave can push you a little off course. Here you can see the autopilot holding course and the trim tabs creating lists to reduce impact and heavy chop. With 22 gallons of fuel in the bow and another 21 in the seat pedestal, gives a comfortable 150 miles of range. For longer trips, the fuel valve can be set to a portable tank position and connected to an external tank from a hose inside the seat pedestal, adding another 50 miles per 12-gallon tank with fuel to spare. But what if it all goes wrong? Only one engine, seas can change, that unexpected wave can throw me over while trolling, having me sitting there watching the Panga cruise away. For that, I have the Fell Marine overboard system. If the sensor detects I'm touching the water, or if it's 50 feet away from the receiver, it will cut the engine. Additional sensors can be used for passengers to notify me if anybody were to fall overboard. Other things that can go wrong. Mechanical issues. It's not the Coast Guard's responsibility to come get you. It's important to have towing insurance and a way to communicate. While I should be able to reach them on VHF, I've opted for a Garmin inReach. It's a way to keep family and friends updated on any changes in plans, or to send the towing company your location. For the nearshore connectivity, I've added a multi-band cell repeater. This seems to extend the cell range an additional 5 miles from the average 10 miles of range offshore. When it's an emergency, I also have an ACR personal location beacon that operates on an RF level and not dependent on satellite. While not necessary, I would recommend considering these communication devices prior to needing them. To avoid some emergencies, I'm running 3 bilge pumps, one 3,700 gallon per hour and 2 800 gallon per hour pumps. 2 live in the hull and should not see water unless the deck's 800 gallon per hour drain can't keep up. The deck drain has to run off a pump as the floor is not self-bailing. That would require at least 6 to 8 inches of raise to accommodate that. So that summarizes the Panga and where I'm sitting right now. If you have any questions, please comment below. I'll try to answer. So the next project I've got sitting behind me is we're working on the Jeep Wrangler, and we're going to be putting the 2-liter turbo diesel in it and get that running. So good winter project, I guess. So catch y'all later.